I'm Jess Zimbabwe, Executive Director of the Daniel Rose Center for Public Leadership and Land Use at the Urban Land Institute. An intelligent city, I think, is a city that allows the city to be even more city than it previously was. So I think cities are the most sustainable thing that we've invented as a species. They allow us to live together in close proximity, to share knowledge and creative ideas and capital that have led to all the creative advances of human society, from early inventions of telling time and systems of currency to today's superconductors or jet engines. Intelligent cities are those that find ways to make their systems work so that people can continue to live in that close proximity and help them overcome the potential challenges or obstacles to doing so. Broad access to data that the internet brings to us and all the small technologies that allow us to carry all the data around in our phone and share it with each other easily. The potential is that those feedback loops can be much more broadly accessible, can go to more than just decision makers, can go to everyday citizens, and can be almost instantaneous in terms of how you give feedback. We've heard people at an event get feedback from people who are following and at the event in Twitter. This room's too cold, and they can turn the air conditioning up just from that, immediate response to the feedback. The challenges, and going back to how we're currently talking about intelligent cities with all the data that's out there, a lot of this copious amount of data is really challenging for human brains to deal with. Every new type of data that you learn to effectively input into your work is almost like learning a new language. It takes the brain, brains are tremendously powerful, but it takes them some time to adapt. I think a lot of the anecdote of when AutoCAD and drafting softwares first were invented, the only people in any architectural office who knew how to use them were the people who just graduated from school, the young people, the 22, 24-year-olds. And the principals of the firm had no idea how this was going. And so the story is that the young people in the firms took advantage of that in some sense. So they would say, I'm going to do it in AutoCAD. Oh, it'll take me a week to get you that drawing. It's a computer. It takes me a long time. But in fact, AutoCAD made everything they were doing, the layers of drawings, that much faster. But it took some time before the people who became the decision makers in the architectural firms sort of realized the time-saving potential of all of those technological advances. Competing systems of data in some senses. That's why you see Google Maps not being able to communicate with every single transit operator's data about where and when their buses run because they have sort of different systems of data. And everybody has some investment in the system of data they've been using, right? They've already built a way to put it on their website. They're selling some ads on their website, so they have their little investment. And it takes time for them to recognize the other benefit that they might get of being a part of this bigger system. So to take down there and be willing to go back on their investment and buy into somebody else's investment because it's a better system that provides them with some other benefit. I think that there's big generation challenges. I think there are a lot of class differences too in people's ability to access that data. And I think, to some extent, you can depend on, there's a lot of commerce happening online. And so there's a lot of market-driven reason to have this data expanded and for people to be investing great sums of money into improving user interfaces to make them more useful for more people to be able to access it. But I think that also goes to show that we probably can't depend just on the privatized market-driven solutions. That I think we have to make sure that our public entities, our government systems are also keeping up in terms of their ability to use this data, ability to push this data out and to get data back from their citizens and to keep up so that they're not just depending on things that fall off the side of the commercial train of data and its usefulness in the world of commerce. I think the biggest potential of intelligent cities is to give people more choices and more informed choices. So, it used to just be that you go to buy a house and you have the sort of information that the realtor provides to you about the house. But if you could know, for instance, very quickly, because all this data is much more accessible now. So if you could look up the 10 houses that you're looking at, one house in this suburb and one house in an adjoining suburb, and you know that the house in Suburb A has recently passed, a couple of years ago, a library bond of many $1 million. And that's a community that's then investing in their future and in keeping those systems up. And the community next door hasn't passed any such public bonds in the last 50 years. That's a piece of data that's hard to find out in the old ways of looking at housing and comparing your housing options. But in the new ways, that's the kind of thing that could be much more instantaneous when you look on your iPhone and you're comparing different houses. For employers and employees to be able to look at the real-time time and transportation cost of getting between different places of employment and places of living. So you could, talking about what the real transportation cost of living in one neighborhood versus another. A neighborhood that's car dependent, where you're not going to be anywhere near transit, is going to be much more expensive overall than one where you're near a transit station. But that kind of costing isn't easily displayed in, again, our old world systems of choice making. But so I think that the big potential that we're going to see is people have a lot more ability to make choices. Even the hot lanes when you're on the freeway and you're deciding to go into a faster moving lane or another, but it's priced differently depending on what time of day that is. So you are able to make a split-second choice. Is it worth it to me to move into the faster lane traffic? But you're also able to internalize that and think to yourself, well, maybe tomorrow morning, could I wait a little bit longer or go in a little bit earlier so that I'm not at the peak commute? Because then I could use the hot lane and it would be even cheaper because you have access to that data that you didn't. You're not in a helicopter in the traffic copter, so you don't know that otherwise. But the real-time pricing allows you to get access to the tools of choice that you didn't have before.